The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. We're about to get started. Give everybody another minute or two to join, and then we'll get started with the webinar.
Hello, I'm there. Hello.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Hello, I'm there.
Okay. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us here. This session is entitled A Bird's Eye View into a Leading Global Company's IoT Journey. It's a topic both service providers and companies of all sizes are very interested in hearing about. And I'm extremely excited to present Zumtobel's take on this topic to you today. Okay, so today's speakers, I'll introduce them, are Gianni Vratzin, the CEO of Axonize, now a Planin company, Dan Titunia, Senior Product Manager of Digital Services at Zumtobel, and Eric Jaspers, Product Strategy and Innovation Officer at Planin. Here's a quick overview of what we're going to cover in today's session. We're going to start with a landscape, which Yaniv Vratzin will present. Then we're going to move on to talking a little bit about Zumtobel and have a dialogue with Dan from Zumtobel, followed by a little bit about Planin and the Axonize offering, benefits, and then we'll turn it over to you guys for a Q&A. So have your questions ready. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Gianni. Over to you, Gianni.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to present to you all today. So as we all know, the way that people live and the way that they are now utilizing space has changed. People care more about their experiences rather than simply visiting spaces. Many people are working partially in the office and partially from home, what is known as a hybrid solution. Focus is now placed on health and safety in the workspace and across other spaces rather than just being comfortable. Customer loyalty is crucial for success as opposed to random visits to restaurants, retail, hotels, and other spaces. Today, companies need to work in an integrated way rather than with siloed systems. These are some numbers about the global phenomenon. With lost office space, there is a huge need to consolidate with space utilization. Facilities are shifting globally across all facility types, from offices to campuses, factories, hospitals, and retail. And this phenomenon changes everything. Space utilization is increasing. There is a need to reduce operational costs, enhance employee satisfaction, achieve a healthier environment, conserve energy, and focus on occupant and tenant experiences. Over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Janif. So at this point, I would like to introduce Dan Tutinia from Zumtobel for an insightful dialogue regarding Zumtobel's IoT journey. I am going to be moderating this dialogue today, but before we get started, Dan, could you say a few words about Zumtobel and what it is that you do at Zumtobel for us?
Hey, sure. Thank you, Donna. So Zumtobel Group is obviously a leading supplier of lighting solutions, quite innovative lighting solutions, and also lighting control solutions. It has quite an important history, and it led to the current state where we are looking into getting into the IoT world. And a little bit more than Zumtobel, maybe it's more important to understand what is Digital Services, which is a newly created team. And the idea is to take the innovative lighting and solutions and take that further. And we do that by utilizing the lighting infrastructure. Now, about myself, I'm actually part of this. I am a recently addition to the Digital Services team within Zumtobel. I think I'm about 2.5 months into the company. And the reason is my previous experience working in the IoT field with hardware, connectivity, and platform manufacturers, also with the BMS, having BMS experience and lighting control experience. So I have joined Digital Services specifically for this journey that we are starting, and hopefully I'm going to be able to get us further.
Great, thank you, Dan. So at this point, let's get started with the dialogue. I'll be asking some questions, and hopefully Dan will be able to provide you with insightful responses. So Dan, the first question is that a lot of folks are talking about is, what were the factors that you considered before deciding to offer IoT to your customers?
So I guess this is a natural progression from the industry that was previously. The Zumtobel has a great history in delivering lighting products, and then we have there is obviously a portfolio of hardware, of lighting hardware, and there is obviously a brand quality awareness that we can benefit from that. We have been building this over time. We have got to a place where this is again well known, and there is quite a market awareness about this. But then there is time now to enable more and to use the lighting infrastructure that we are having. Now, as IoT goes, the infrastructure offered by lighting, having devices with this large density within a building, it's a great building block on which we can actually get into this. So yeah, that is the main factor that actually led to creating this short-range IoT connectivity based on Zumtobel lighting. And yeah, that's mainly the reason.
Great, thank you, Dan. So the next question that I have is, what were the top challenges you faced before implementing IoT?
This is a very important topic to discuss, because the IoT world, the access to the IoT world is not actually granted. It might seem easy, it might seem the easy step forward to get there, but previously there are estimates of 60 billion devices by 2020 that would be connected devices, and then the reality proved that this figure was actually very much overestimated. So in 2020, there were actually less than 10 billion devices connected. So that's a very big difference, obviously. And then the estimates have been reviewed, and we are now looking at maybe 25 billion by 2030. So the IoT world is not necessarily as easy as it sounds in terms of accessing it. So in order to get into this, then we need to understand exactly why we are doing it. And it's important to understand the business challenges of the customers. In the previous slide, I think there was a survey that we got some information from in terms of what the customers actually really value and what they really need. So some of them are pretty straightforward, like, for example, reducing the energy bills, and that's actually a very important topic. We'll discuss that probably later. But also there are financial related reasons, like improving the capital planning processes and so on. So it's important to understand exactly why are we getting into this world and what we can do. And the next challenge is actually building up a portfolio. In the next slide, there is a short description about the main components of an IoT system. Now, obviously, we have the edge devices. Zumtobel is actually great in doing those. We have the lighting features, and we can add sensors and various other data sources into this edge world. Then there is a digital backbone, and that is actually quite important because we need to connect all those data sources together. And then we have the digital services, which are supported by something like a cloud platform. So those are the three major components of an IoT system. And we needed to make sure, the challenge was that we needed to cover all of that. So how did we do this? Now, lighting, it's obvious, that's what Zumtobel does, so that's pretty straightforward. And then we were looking at trying to understand how can we cover the other two. And the decision was that it's much better and safer to actually partner with people that know what they are doing. Now, on the digital backbone, for example, we are using companies like Wirepass for the mesh, for the wireless mesh technology. And obviously, we are partnering with Axonize on the platform side as well. And this is a little bit better described in the next slide, where the sensor layer is what Zumtobel does best, and then we have the edge cloud layer where the connectivity piece is being supported by our partners, and obviously we have the cloud layers in the smart platform, and all of that is actually leading off the application layer. So we are covering different applications. We are covering what is resulting, what are the actions coming out of the use cases that we understand from our customers.
Thank you, Dan. So what was the process and requirements for selecting an IoT platform partner? Can you talk about that a little?
Sure. So the process is a generic process, basically. So, but it is very important to start with what we are trying to achieve. Therefore, understanding the user stories, understanding the requirements, understanding the day-to-day pains of our customers. That actually led, so the user stories that led to creating RFIs and RFPs, and then looking at the comparable text in the market, understanding what are whether the key stories are actually met by these technologies, and obviously selecting what we think is the best option at this moment in time.
Great, thank you. So can you take us through the implementation process and what that looked like?
So The implementation process, I believe, is actually a live process. I don't think that the implementation process is it's getting to an end, right? It's not a start and finish process. Mainly because this is not a box. This is not something that is being manufactured, produced, sold, and sent to a customer, and that's it. A platform is a live component. A platform will always add features. The platform is required to always conform to the new requirements. Year on year there might be new requirements on the market, so the platform needs to adapt itself. Therefore, all those changes will then need to be we need to get through that implementation again. Now, in terms of the actual pains of getting through that implementation, so first we, as I was saying, we have great products, edge products and devices that are supplying data, and then we have this platform. But then what we need is to make sure that that data somehow gets to the platform itself. So we need something like a middleware or some form of integration. So that is definitely part of our continuous implementation as well. And then following from that, we need to train the internal stakeholders. We need to train the support teams. We need to train the selling department. So we need to make sure that everyone in this process is aware of what we are trying to achieve and how we are going to achieve that.
Great, thank you. So my next question is, what is the best way to target customers in order to be successful, from existing customers with upselling to them or over to new customers?
So I believe what is key here is to try to understand and speak their language, right? So we can go and describe this wonderful world of IoT, but they actually have day-to-day problems. They have day-to-day requirements of solutions that will meet their problems. So that's quite important, getting to the same level of conversation, to the same base level, and then trying to build from there, right? So understanding what they are actually requiring and offering a solution. Now, obviously, there are various ways of approaching customers. So, for example, upselling, it's a good leverage from what we already have there as as a company, what sort of products, and enabling those products to get further services. For example, that's an important way to get to the market. But all of this needs to be done, as I was saying, with understanding the customer's problems and required solutions in mind.
Perfect, thank you. Can you talk a little bit about specific smart building use cases that you have recently onboarded, along with some of the details of the challenges, processes, and eventual outcomes of those use cases for us?
Sure. So in order to talk about use cases, maybe it's a good idea to explain a little bit why we have chose Axonize as opposed to other platforms, because there are a few key elements within the platform that we believe they are helping us to get on this market. And possibly the most important one is the ability to have calculated properties, and I'm going to describe a little bit in a minute what exactly is that, in a way which is accessible to a normal end user, right? So without coding, without requiring coding. And that's quite important, because if you look, for example, at the basic requirements of a facility manager, for example, they are not very complicated, right? So they are not actually rocket science. Now, understanding, for example, the carbon emission, right? There isn't necessarily a sensor that will tell you how much carbon a building is actually consuming, but then you have other metrics that you can measure. You have like energy consumption, which is definitely measurable. So that's a real world data that can be brought into the platform. But then that doesn't help necessarily by itself, because you need to apply some formulas, for example, to deduce the carbon footprint of that particular building. So how do you do that? Now, if you are a coder of sorts, that's pretty simple. Writing a script for that's actually quite easy. If you are I don't know, an Excel user, that's again something which is not very complicated to do. But then you need a platform that always gets that information, gets the data from the field, and then shows you the actual result that you want to see, right? Because looking at raw data, okay, it's useful for, techies like myself, for example. I like to look at that, but not for the majority of people. So as an end user, it's actually having the ability to look at the data that you need, which is derived from the actual data that is coming to the platform. That's an important benefit, and that is probably the main reason we're actually working with Actionize. Okay, so if we could go back a little bit to the previous slide, that is a first example. That would be a first example.
Right.
Probably on the other side.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Okay, so optimizing space, right? So again, I'm going to refer to what I was trying to explain, which is raw data versus calculated data. So raw data is presence coming from PIRs, which normal devices that have been in the industry for tens of years. So that's pretty straightforward. At Zumtobel, we found a way to make sure that we are monitoring individual desks by using a normal PIR. And by using the Actionize platform, we are actually transforming that raw data into whether the desk is occupied or not. Okay, so then we use the dashboard facility into the Actionize platform to show that in various visualization forms, in various layers. In this slide, for example, we are looking at a heat map of actual utilization of desks throughout the building. That's a simple way for a facility manager to understand how the various areas in the buildings are actually used. But also this can lead to very interesting use cases. Like, for example, if a particular desk is utilized, then we can use Actionize to set a property for that desk on whether it needs to be cleaned or not. Okay, and then we can actually assign this property to all the desks that have been in use throughout the day. And then at the end of the day, we can issue a report to the cleaning company, so they will actually know to target exactly what they need to do. So that's maybe a good example that we have actually done quite recently.
Terrific. So here's the use
case. Also, the ambient ASIC is another use case that I think it's actually particularly important. Now, obviously, we had BMS systems, and they do work. They have been here for, I don't know, tens of years again, and they are pretty strong. Having said that, they could benefit from more granular data on environment metrics. So Zumtobel, on the edge side, what we have done, we have made sure that our lighting are they have sensors embedded, environmental metric sensors. So for example, temperature, humidity, CO2, VOC, and so on. And by having those sensors in light, then we are ensuring a greater density for these sensors, a greater density for the environmental data, and we are connecting to the local BMS system and sending that data, and then the BMS system can utilize the granularity available of, for example, temperature to make sure it works a little bit more efficient. Okay, and we can.
Right.
Also, now, obviously of huge importance is trying to understand the energy consumption throughout the building. Generally, this is not granular enough. What we can do is generate data for energy consumption of luminaires, individual luminaires or group luminaires, and calculating that again is something that is not actually new on the market, but using Actionize, we can do that calculation with no code or with no actual no requirement to know more than a normal user would actually be able to do. So the platform allows to create this sort of data, this sort of calculations, and that results in usable insights, like, for example, what is the energy consumption of lighting in a particular zone.
Terrific. Thank you. Can you talk about your expectations for the near future, taking the post-COVID situation into account? What do you expect to see more of? What do you expect to see less of? Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, Dan.
Actually, Janice talked a little bit about that, and to be honest, that is perfectly correct. I agree with the slides presented at the beginning of this presentation. It is more or less exactly what we are expecting. Having said that, there are some details, obviously. So we can talk about details. For example, the fact that we are expecting that the IoT world would actually, the building would move from having siloed systems, separated system, into getting integrated between themselves. So all the systems within a building would actually work much more closer together than they used to. And I believe a smart building platform would be the middle point that would facilitate all of this. So this is, I don't know, one of the details that we can actually talk about. But in fact, what I think is major is the road we are on at the moment around the three big words, ESG, as in environmental, social, and governance. And all big companies at the moment, and medium companies even, for them, they are actually quite important to be ESG friendly. And that has a big impact, a big financial impact on how these companies actually are operating. Now, ESG, as I was saying, so environmental, social, and governance, some of the factors that we cannot necessarily influence as Zumtobel or as a smart building platform, I think, like, for example, governance, it's a little bit on a different side of the spectrum. However, specifically on the environment, there is a lot that we can actually do. Now, obviously, there is this net zero carbon target that everyone will obviously is aiming for. That's something that we need to get to. We have scopes 1 and 2, which are quite easy for each company to achieve in terms of emissions. So emissions which are directly generated. And buildings are contributed by about 40% to the generic emissions that we need to get to zero carbon. And scope 2 obviously is any emissions that are generated on behalf of the company that we are representing. So those are too easy to monitor and control. But also we have scope 3 where we are talking about the emissions generated by the supply chain that the company is using, which is a little bit more difficult to monitor. However, what can we do? We can use the technology. We can use the technology as an enabler to first monitor and then generate insights that would result in changes that would eventually get those emissions down. So there is a huge accent on ESG, which I believe it's pretty, it's like the buzzword that is becoming more and more important in the building management industry.
Perfect, thank you, Dan. So let me ask you a little bit about why you selected, you mentioned it and you touched upon it before, but why would you say you selected Axonize at the end of the day as your IoT platform of choice?
So there are a few factors. Now, obviously, I did mention that the technology factor that allows a user to generate data, which is not necessarily raw data, which is coming from sensors. So that's definitely a factor here. But actually, the most important factor, and generally speaking, a huge factor in creating a partnership is not necessarily the tech as the people are. I think partnering with the right people would generate the necessary tech in the end anyway. But again, the fact that Axonize actually had these details of technology that are supporting our use cases, I think that obviously was quite important. Now, also, looking at the types of users, the personas that we are expecting this platform to be used, from our customers. We are looking at anything between a maintenance engineer up to maybe a CEO, right? So obviously there are different requirements from those types of people. And we are looking at the fact that the platform itself can support in an easy way all of these personas, right? So generating, for example, in a CEO case, maybe he would want to see actually, I don't know, 3 or 4 numbers generically. Okay, that can be done without any again, coding experience, without anything else. So it's actually a simple use case of having a good UI. And then again, if you are an engineer, then you need to get a little bit deeper into the details of that. So again, the platform itself actually allows you to do this.
Terrific. Thank you. So another question I have is, can you provide some more insight to attendees who are considering adding an IoT platform or smart building use cases to their technical roadmaps? Any words of wisdom, insights?
This is a little bit leading from the previous question, because what I was saying is that the quality of partnership is important. Being able to speak the same language, being able to work with your partner and trying to achieve maybe having very similar requirements and therefore trying to achieve a solution for that. That's important. Maybe that's the most important thing. Getting to know the partner and getting to know exactly how can you work together. That's actually important. Also, I think generally getting into the IoT world, there needs to be a strong focus on customer use cases. I've been talking about this at the beginning of this call, and it's quite important to understand exactly why are we here, what are we trying to do, what are we trying to achieve, right? Getting the customer context, understanding the customer context, and being able to respond and speak the same language. Also, there needs to be a good context to the core business, right? So let's say even if you are like I don't know, a small startup trying to get into this world, right? We need to make sure that the core business that we have is tightly related to the customer IoT requirements. So having the right of play in this market. Okay, so what am I bringing into this market? Why am I here? What am I trying to achieve? What am I good at? Or even better, what am I actually better at? What am I differentiating with? Okay, so those are questions that obviously we need to ask ourselves. Maybe companies they need to ask, and they need to find what is the reason that they are trying to get into there, and obviously what is the route for that will actually come naturally after that.
Terrific. Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate all your great insights, and I'm sure the audience does as well. I'm going to, at this point, turn it over to Eric Jaspers to speak a little bit about Planon's IoT view. So over to you, Eric.
Thank you, and thank you all for being with us. Actually, to make the point, Dan, to what you said, I think when you were speaking, because as Planon, we are basically, of course, in the business of operating and managing buildings and portfolios. I think as you conveyed it today, lighting systems as a sensor. I think it's a compelling concept that you have in buildings in general, because what you need in buildings, of course, is lighting. It's everywhere, and when you combine it with the sensing technology as well, it's for our customer base and the users of buildings and operators of buildings, that's a really good approach that we see happening in the market. So before we move into further detail, I would like to shortly introduce who Planon is, as we basically, of course, went into a new step in partnering with Axonize. We have been into the business of real estate management and facility management services for over 35 years. And basically, we are quite well rated by market analysts like Fanatics and IDC, and basically have a customer base that's global and a presence that's global as well. basically, of course, like your company then. So next slide, please. Okay, why did we? Because Xonize first was a partner, and then basically at a certain point we decided together to embrace Xonize, the Xonize platform completely into our product portfolio. And so I would like to explain a little bit why and what kind of positioning Xonize will retain, of course. It's very important to understand, I think, that there's a dual strategy here. Xonize will basically retain itself as an IoT platform in the marketplace as it basically has today. But next to that, we are completely in our own product strategy. We are completely embracing the IoT platform, making it an intrinsic part of our own platform itself. So, what kind of applications do we put into the market? Next slide, please. It's basically about managing buildings, managing services to employees working in buildings, and providing services, maintenance, hard services, soft services to organizations in terms of service providing. Now, for that purpose, Planon has a very, well, from the ground built up architecture of a product that we basically have been developing over 20 years already. And the thing is that we provide this standard software platform with all kinds of services in it, in which customers can basically build or, let's say, configure their own applications for. And this is the market cap we have. Now, of course, one of the elements of the platform that we see very necessary as going forward in this world and within the changing era of connectivity is, of course, IoT services. And that's basically the positioning that we are developing together. Xonize and Planon together are really positioning it in our universe platform itself. So our vision around the integration of Planon next to its standalone positioning is to provide our customers with generic IoT services that they can actually apply to any use case or business case that they choose and they feel that is important to them. So the genericity is very important and to understand. And now, when we had the conversation between us in the conversations towards the let's say the next stage of collaboration between us, we had, of course, very much conversations. Could we do it? And one of the compelling arguments is basically what you said as well, Dan. Is it's the great, I think, the great capability of Xonize IoT platform is not just to think about sensors and sensor connectivity, but make something of a logical structure out of all those sensors. Things that customers can really embrace, work with, is simple. And that's very important because in this world, you talked about it then as well, that the adoption rate of devices is actually lower than expected. And we believe that simplification of adoption is going to play a very important role for adoption in general of IoT applications and use cases. You know, if it's going to be overly complex or technology driven, it's not going to happen in a wide scale, or at least at a lesser pace. So next slide. Now, we work for organizations that run buildings or are space managers or workplace managers, maintenance managers, and that kind of thing. Now, thinking about IoT, what's the purpose of what's the contribution of IoT in general going to be in our field of operation, in our marketplace? And that's effectively monitoring, understanding what's really happening. You talked about it as well, Dan. Understanding what's happening in the infrastructure, understanding what's happening around the workplace, understanding what's happening around in spaces and HVAC areas and that kind of thing. And then this monitoring function is very important because it basically discloses the idea or the notion of what's going well and what can be improved upon, you know? And there's two sides of response. because actually with the embracing of Axonize, Planon is moving towards a smart building platform itself. So basically allowing customers not only to consume information as comes out of IoT infrastructures, but also respond to them. And this response is basically, in our view, is basically two-sided, a two-sided story. That's a service response by people who need to vent something, to keep it simple, or an automated interaction. And there we talk again about what you said as well, Dan. It's around what you can respond to by automation, and you don't need any personal intervention or decision making for. So sometimes it's a part of logic, sometimes it's a part of process. So it's very important that to understand that as we see the world moving on, is that actually the notion of IoT will be about digital twins, and that will make it consumable. And digital twin is a very strong concept within the Axonize IoT proposition. Next slide. So here's just a mock-up, a kind of, let's say, a display of some core component of Axonize and Planon universe on the other side. So in the middle of there, this what you see is what we call data digital twin. And this is just a kind of blurry picture, but what we want to basically convey is that when we expect our customers to adopt IoT for certain use cases to solve certain problems, whether it's monitoring an escalator, making sure that you can repair or you can maintain it before it breaks down, just as a simple thing, or a space that you are running as a space manager and you need to understand the occupancy rate and whether it's going to be used in well ways and stuff. Basically, all these types of assets can be described in pure data without any representation, and that's what we call data digital twins. So basically, when an escalator would signal that its motor is overheating, for instance, it's just a simple example. I don't need a representation of the escalator. I just know that I need to put out some repair guy to basically replace the motor and so on and move on. There's no representation there, and that's the notion between data digital twins. And it's a very strong concept of the Axonize platform. Next slide, please. Okay. So the thing is that we actually together, Axonize and Planon Universe, we dissect the notion of digital twins in two elements. It's the data part and its behavioral part that you also explained about, Dan. You can, with no code, you can basically do the algorithms to understand its behavior and basically create events around it. Something's going wrong, or a seat is getting occupied, or it's getting empty, or whatever. So there's that data part and its visualization. Now, in the integration with Axonize on the Planon Universe platform, moving towards a smart building platform in the combination, we basically, on our platform, we have a host of types of visualizations. You know, in many cases, you see that the digital twin is being seen as a BIM model with some associated data on it. While we together, we say we dissect that in a data part and a visualization part. The data part can be used for actually for automation purposes. So the scope of that, and that's of course very important, that the scope of that is the same. It is basically the potential scope of the Axonize platform is to cover actually all kinds of relevant assets and things around buildings, including lighting systems that matter to people who use them and or operate them. So I would like to conclude by that. If there's any questions, of course, I'll be open to answer. I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. So we'll leave the floor to the audience at the end. We'll let them ask their questions. So now I would like to turn it over to Yaniv to say a few words about some of the benefits of using the Axonize platform, now a Planon company, as Eric mentioned. So I'll turn it over to Johnny. The floor is yours.
Thanks again. So I'll talk a little bit about the main benefits of Actionize as a platform. The main 4 benefits are, first of all, using the Actionize, you can connect any data source, no matter what the device is it the protocol, what the protocol is. It can be any application, platform, sensor, and so on. Most integration are being done without writing any code, so it can take only a couple of hours or 1 or 2 days to integrate a new system into the Actionize. After you connect all the data sources, the next thing is to build the different business logics or the use cases on top of the Actionize platform. A use case can be, I want to count the number of people going into the restrooms. When the threshold gets to 30, I would like to send the cleaning staff to clean the restroom. Okay, that's one use case. And so we can build any use case with just drag and drop, very simple. In a typical smart building, you're going to have tens or hundreds of use cases. The next benefit is a single pane of glass. So not only that you can manage every building as a separate silo, but you can manage, customers can manage their entire portfolio of buildings from one screen and share business logic and data across those projects, buildings. For example, I can create a chart on my screen that compares 3 buildings' energy consumption, or compares 2 regions. I can create a rule, and with one click, apply the rule on all my buildings worldwide, and so on. It saves a lot of time and money to manage your entire portfolio from one single pane of glass. And the 4th benefit is the flexibility, scalability, and self-serviceness of the platform. The Actionize is a cloud-native platform. It was built from the underlying architecture to support lots of data inputs. So it scales up automatically based on the load that you have on the systems. And moreover, you can, because of the underlying architecture and the business model, companies can start small with Actionize. You don't have to invest lots of budget or time. You can pick one floor, choose one use case, run it for 2 months, pay, I don't know, $20 a month for the 2 months, and then expand your smart building use cases to additional buildings, additional floors, and so on. It gives you lots of flexibility. And if you register for a demonstration of the Actionize platform, you see how simple it is. So everything I mentioned, you can do in a self-service manner. You don't need support. You don't need engineers. Everything is based on drag and drop and so on. In addition to connecting just the devices or data sources, Actionize connects the entire ecosystem of the building. So yes, it is the legacy system, the digital twin that Eric mentioned, the sensors, gateways, but also the occupants and the employee that maintain the buildings, external services like public transportation and so on. We get the data across all these systems and entities into one place, and we make a kind of an operating system for the building. Some use cases, some sample selected use cases, space utilization, energy efficiency, asset management, indoor navigation, booking, ticketing, safety, smart parking, and many, many, many more. The ROI is clear, is immediate. Again, onboarding a new building to Actionize or a new use case takes only a couple of hours or a few days. So the ROI is immediate and it's very, very clear. That's it. The Actionize platform is an agnostic smart enterprise platform. We transform spaces to smart ones within mere days, so you can get new business insights from a single pane of glass.
Thank you. Thank you, Yaniv. That was great. So at this point, I would like to turn the floor over to you all to type in your questions in the chat box on your panel, if you have any, and we'll be happy to answer those questions. I'll give everybody a minute to type in their questions, and then we'll see what we have here.
Okay, in the meantime, can we kill the time, so to say? I would like to basically address one thing that I think we did not speak much about today yet. And that's the openness, as you indicate already, of the IoT platform itself to kind of different devices and the different standards of communication of smart devices. Could you say a little bit about that, Yaniv, perhaps? Because I think the openness to allow basically a lot of different types of devices to be connected to an IoT platform is a very important prerequisite to make this work. So can you give a few words about that, Yaniv, perhaps, into this device openness of Axon?
Yeah, so the Axonize platform is based on 6 core technologies. 2 of them covers the connectivity. So it will be very easy to connect to any type of data sources into the Axonize platform and out from the Axonize platform to third-party services. And we can connect devices directly. We can connect devices that are connected locally to a specific gateway, and the gateways are connected to Axonize. We can connect cloud-to-cloud systems. So if a vendor has a set of sensors or a solution that the data resides on the cloud, we can have a cloud-to-cloud integration very easily and get all the data across all their devices and projects. We also support standard protocols, BACnet, Modbus, OPC, MQTT, and so on, out of the box. We also support, as part of the Azure, we can run on AWS or Azure, but most of our projects are on Azure. So as part of running on Azure, we support any compatible device with IoT Hub. So Microsoft publishes a list of all the compatible devices, thousands of devices. So Axon is supported out of the box as well. Our platform is an API first. Sorry?
Yeah, and that's basically what Dan, because I want to go back to that, because Dan basically addressed that as well. You know, complexity of IoT deployment is currently still in many cases an inhibitor to really adopt it. And I think that's a very important thing that we basically need to be mindful of. And I think many of the end user customers like yours, Dan, as well, they don't think about sensors. They think about the information that they need to acquire by the sensors. Huh?
They're actually thinking about systems altogether. And to be honest, it's not very much important for them what's actually behind the scene. But what I would like to do is maybe add to what Yaniv was saying, because I think there is a quite an important point to be explained there. Now, being open, right? That's obviously not a unique thing, right? There are a lot of platforms at the moment which are, they have an open API, for example, and there are a lot of edge systems that they have an open API, like, you know, sensors or other types of systems. But then, as a customer, as someone that is actually deploying these kind of systems and being in contact with the end user of those systems, that's not enough. Right? So, okay, we have an open API on the platform, we have an open API on the edge devices, but that doesn't mean the problem is fixed, because we need to actually connect them. And getting the support to create that integration, getting that little middleware software, which might be a small piece of software or maybe a larger and more complicated piece of software, that is vital, because otherwise, obviously, it wouldn't work. So what I would like to add to what Yaniv was saying is the fact that getting support for creating the integrations, not just the option of having them, I think that's huge, and it's a factor in getting a partner into this world.
Yes.
Right.
Right. Thank you. So I will ask the first question that was asked by the audience. What's tech stack, specifically server back end side, is helping you overcome the latency challenges?
I'll answer that.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Actionize platform is built as a microservice solution. So every capability of the Actionize platform is a separate microservice. And every microservice is using the top-notch technology for its purpose. Okay, so one microservice may use Linux and Java and a SQL database, and another microservice can use other technologies, other operation system, and other stuff, and so on. And that's what the communication. Okay, another technology that we have is the Actionize Extreme Engine, which connects all those microservices and manages them. Helps us creating a very, very high performance solution. We support more than 10 million events per second, and we scale up, scale down, as I mentioned, automatically based on load. I hope it answers the question.
Thanks, Yaniv. So another question being asked here is, can you show us or tell us how your platform will use multiple data sources to project future trends, results, etc.? Want to take that?
So the idea in Actionize.
Well,
Eric,
you go ahead.
The idea in Actionize is we have the Actionize IoT Hub and the Extreme Engine. So on our connectivity part, I mentioned two technologies. Not only that we transform the data from the devices, platforms, applications into the Actionize, but we also unify the data. Okay, so we can have two separate solutions. One is a motion sensor, another one is a temperature sensor, but from different vendors. Both of them sense temperature. Okay, although it's a motion sensor, sometimes motion sensor sense temperature. So we unify the data in Actionize, and we classify all the data types there. And as soon as we unify all the data, we can treat the entire data sources, the entire information comes into the Actionize as a generic one, okay, agnostic to the source. And then we can look at trends across building, across applications, across use cases, across different vendors, and so on. We have the Actionize Insights. We support machine learning using Planon. We have many tools to identify trends and so on. But as soon as all the data is unified and agnostic to the source, it gives us lots of power and insights to create to identify those trends.
Right.
Can I add to that, Yaniv? Perhaps
yes, please do.
In our joint planning, going forward, I would say AI is machine learning is a beast that's hungry for data. Now, IoT is of course the prime provider of raw data that you can basically draw upon in terms of new use cases for AI and machine learning. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the time forthcoming as we connected the IoT platform onto our own Universe business platform. So basically, I would certainly advise to stage any predictive kind of approach by first introducing the data. Make sure it's reliable, it's repeatedly there, because you need the time series kind of approach to do the real machine learning, because you basically have to associate events that happen to the data readings that you had before that. And that's the source of learning. So the IoT data sets are crucial, but you have to build a history before you can go into machine learning kind of applications as well. But that's certainly on the roadmap, and that's basically one of the core components of smart building platforms going forward.
Thank you, guys. So I think we have time for one or two more questions. So another question here. It was fascinating to hear how much lower the adoption is on the number of connecting IoT devices compared to what was projected a few years earlier. Can the panel discuss this further? Also, what specific steps can AEC FMO take to increase the future adoption IoT rates?
That's for Eric. Right?
Well, it's a good question. I think, as Dan said as well, Dan, I think you said it as well. At least you pointed at it. It doesn't start at the technology side. it starts at the business side. What kind of contribution do you expect from smart infrastructures to produce to the business? Now, when we look to the marketplace of buildings in general, then I think what binds us together in terms of lighting systems and the generic maintenance of operation of buildings, in terms of energy consumption, lighting systems are still a huge proportion of the total consumption of buildings, in terms of energy, of course. And technologies like you present to the market today, retrofitting them in buildings will basically lower down the consumption level of it. But in general, when we look at what we expect to happen in the market going forward, is that regulations on the ecological footprint of buildings will emerge in Europe, but also in the US and also in Asia, of course. So buildings are supposed to create lower and lower ecological footprints as time moves on. Now, that of course pertains to understanding energy consumption in its different aspects: lighting, the HVAC, heating, cooling, whatever. And there, it starts with IoT. It starts with submetering. It starts with understanding actual behaviors of systems. Now, so in terms of the connectivity and the volume of connectivity, we think that the whole drive to more sustainable buildings is going to drive a lot of IoT implementation and connectivity of devices. Then, that's it. At least that's our point of view today.
Terrific, thank you.
Also, if I could add to this, the estimates are actually showing that simply having a better technology might not be enough, right? Simply having a data source in a building that you actually had before, but maybe it was a sensor or a device talking backnet locally to the local BMS. So now, okay, now you have this brilliant technology. That means that particular device is now going to send data directly into some data lake, data warehouse, whatever, and you can do interesting things. That's an engineering step forward. Okay, but the simple advance in engineering technology does not necessarily mean adoption on the market. So you need to get that on the market, but along with, in IoT case, insights. So why, as a customer, as an end user, why do I have that? Well, how does it help me? I have already a device which is talking, let's say, backnet as an example. So why exactly actually invest into that? So that was, I think, amongst other things, but that might have been a factor for the lower adoption than originally estimated.
Right, thank you guys. So it looks like we're out of time, a little over, so I apologize for that. So I wanted to take this opportunity to thank everybody for joining. Feel free to reach out to us to set up a more technical workshop for you, here is the email address. And if you have further questions, please don't hesitate to write us. We're happy to answer them together with Planin and Zumtobel and what have you. So again, thank you for taking the time and looking forward to meeting you in the future. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.